Good afternoon. I come to you with Tales from the Sweet Brook, number 5, growing up in the 40s and 50s. I was born the day before FDR was elected the fourth time for president. That was November the 6th, 1944. I only had one baby picture. I was about probably 8 months old. My mother was 45 when I was born. My dad was 39, and I was born by C-section at the Highland, Illinois, St. Joseph's Hospital. I didn't get any other pictures taken until I was probably 5 or 6. I remember the old farmhouse we lived in. No plumbing, a pitcher pump over the cistern on the back porch, an outhouse connected to the chicken house, and I could tell you stories about that. We didn't have TP, we had Sears Roebuck catalogs. I'm so glad we don't have those today. But I guess for those of you who can't find the toilet paper, if you can find a Sears Roebuck catalog, you are doing well, since the catalogs went out of business a long time ago. Well, my sister was in the outhouse one day, and a snake was up in a marten house just outside the door of the outhouse, and she was afraid to leave, and Mom or Dad had to come out and tear the marten house down and get the snake out of there. It was after some bird eggs, I believe. I took a bath in the middle of the kitchen floor, probably the 7th in my family. There were 5 of us kids. We only had water enough to fill it one time, and it was hot water. It was heated on the old cook stove. And I remember one incident where when I was probably about 5 years old, or 4 or 5, and I was horsing around on Sunday morning. The tub was still sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor, and guess what? I fell in it in my Sunday best clothes. And back then, even if you went to a country church, you dressed up. And Mom was a little perturbed because I think that was my only set of Sunday clothes. Well, somehow she found something for me to wear, and we went to church anyway. The house was heated by warm morning stoves that were, I think, burning coal, and everything was recycled back then. For instance, if you had string, you put it in a ball, and we had a ball of string, so you never know when you might need some. Baling wire was used to fix everything. I mean, we wired our gates with it. If your muffler started to fall down, you wired it up, and all other kinds of use for baling wire. I wish we still had more of it. I used to have a package or two that was wrapped up that Dad had saved. I know all of our gates were hooked together with it, and if you want to open a gate, you unwired the baling wire to do it. Wrapping paper, we didn't throw away Christmas wrap. We folded it up and put it in a box and used it year after year. No plastic anything. Feed sack dresses for my sisters made out of the flour sacks. Shoes were resoled. Watches were repaired. There was a wood cook stove in the kitchen for heating things. It had a tank on it for heating water. Washing machine was a ringer type with double tubs for rinsing. We sang around the piano for entertainment. We had a radio in the barn tuned to KMWX radio in St. Louis, and as we were milking the cows, we listened to the Beulah Show. Potatoes were stored in a cellar under the smokehouse, a very scary place to go for me. I didn't know what might be down there, whether it be a snake or a mouse or whatever it might be. And the potatoes kind of got shriveled, and by the end of the season, they weren't very good either, but we survived. When it was muddy, we took a wagon and horses to church. Most of the time we drove a car, but in muddy weather we did that because the roads weren't very good, and we lived almost a half mile off of the main road and back to our place. We went to a little country Methodist church. No electricity, had kerosene lamps, which I never really saw lit. It had a pump organ that my mom's cousin played, and she wanted to make sure that nobody else got to play it when she was gone, so every Sunday she carried the organ stool and all the hymn books out and put it in her car. I found the organ later after the church was closed a friend of mine south of Greenville has it. The stool is not with it, and I'm assuming it was at the lady's house, and when she had her auction, it was sold then. Our family were the only ones that really went to the church. It was my parents, my grandparents, 5 of us kids, and a cousin who played the organ. We sat around potbelly stoves. My brother taught the Sunday school class for the kids, and I think my mom taught the class for adults. My grandpa led the singing. It was interesting, to say the least. Dad decided it was time to close that church and move into the Greenville church, but the lady who played the organ didn't like that idea, so she decided to plan a revival service. So they had a week of revival services, and nobody came except the preacher and her. We went one night because Dad really was ready to be done with it. And I am so glad he was, because then we were able to transition to a bigger church where we had a youth group. Sunday afternoons were spent going to grandparents' homes or Uncle George, who got the Sunday paper and with the funnies, and also had a small black and white TV, and we watched Henry Aldridge and other fun black and white comedies. My earliest memory was when I was about 3.5 years old, my grandparents' funeral. And it was at what is now the Baum's house north of the Dairy Queen. And I still can picture being in that and sitting there at their funeral. About 1950, things started to change. New house with plumbing, indoor bathroom with a tub, toilet paper, electricity, electric stove, freezer for food. I started going to country school right about 1950 when I was 6 years old. It was about a half-mile walk, and there were 8 grades with 1 teacher, 1 room. Pit toilets were inside. There was a boys' room and a girls' room that had pit toilets. And if you look down, it looked like a regular toilet seat, but you look down and you could see this pit. And I had a fear of either falling in or dropping something down there, and I definitely wasn't going to go after what it was I dropped. Later, that school was closed, and I went to Shawnee School, and it had no running water, just a hand pump and outhouse. But it's an interesting thing that Mary Martin, who was our neighbor, cooked marvelous meals in that basement with no running water. She had to go out and pump her water, heat the water on the stove, and so on. But we had good ones. We had fun times there with maple syrup. We decided we were going to tap the maple trees. We didn't realize that soft maple trees have a very low concentration of sugar. But we had fun, and we tried to boil it down. We made ponds in the road ditches and came home muddy, and our parents said, "What in the world were you doing today?" Oh, somebody left a bale of straw at the edge of a field there, and we made a straw hut, and the older kids only let the other kids come on if they asked, and we granted them permission. There was a transition during that time from horses to tractors, from country church to town church, but overall great experiences. I'll have to say that it wasn't all bad growing up in the 40s and early 50s. We had a good time. It was family times. There were times when we really cared about each other, and I'm glad to say that I grew up in that era. I was not a baby boomer. I was pre-baby boomer, and I'm okay with that. Have a great day.